What's up guys, my name is PJ, welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about something that I personally have struggled with a lot and struggle with still today, and that's why in this video I'm not really approaching it as like, let me teach you something, I figured this thing out and let me teach you. I'm really relating more as a friend and really making this video as a reminder for myself and for whoever else may be going through this personal struggle in their lives. I know personally I struggle with this topic, with this issue a lot, and that's why I wanted to make a video about it, because sometimes it's just good to have a reminder, especially like for me, it's good for me to have reminders on my own channel of things that have helped me and share a little bit of some things that have helped me and have those videos kind of exist on my channel just as a reminder to myself and to those whom may need it. So this topic is a challenging topic for me. It is something I struggle with, and it is something that I definitely have not figured out, but within my journey so far, I have learned some things that have helped me, and I wanted to kind of put those in this video just as, like I said, as a reminder to myself and a reminder to others who may be struggling with this. So let's begin by sharing something that I think so many of us who struggle with beating ourselves up too much, being too self-critical, struggle with, or a preconception that we may have if we are the type of person who may beat themselves up too much. And that preconception that I found is we have this misconception that if we beat ourselves up a lot, if we are too hard on ourselves, if we are very difficult with ourselves, if we're very, just in a sense, like cruel to ourselves, if we're beating ourselves up, if we're self-critical, that somehow in some shape or form that actually leads to growth. And I think that is a very common misconception that people who may be struggling with this whole idea of beating ourselves up and having that issue, I think the misconception of like, somehow this helps me be better. Like if I beat myself up a lot, if I beat myself up enough, then I will be enough. Like I will be better. Like if I am so hard on myself that somehow eventually that'll lead to growth. And maybe that does work in the short term, right? Maybe that is something that gets us to a certain point. But I do think that there are two other things in play as well. One is that maybe we're getting to that point of growth despite of that rather than because of it. So maybe it's not that that's actually helping us, but it's like we're just pushing through regardless of the hindrance that it's causing. So that's one. Another thing is I think maybe it does help us grow in the short term, but there is a glass ceiling there. Like maybe it only helps us get to here, but to get from here, wherever it's gotten us, that type of mindset or being, to get to the next level, to levels beyond that approach is not going to get us there. So like what got us to here is not necessarily the same thing that's going to get us to the next level of our lives, whatever that looks like. And so I think those two things are at play also, that like maybe that beating ourselves up is like we've gotten to where we are despite of that, not because of it. So that's one. And then the second thing is maybe it has helped us get to a certain glass ceiling that beyond that it's not going to help us get to. So those two things are also important to keep in mind. But I think the misconception that this beating ourselves up, this approach is helping us grow, I think is a very common misconception amongst people who struggle with being too self-critical and beating themselves up too much. That may help us to an extent to get to a certain point, but I do not think is a sustainable approach. I know in my own life when I do that, which I do tend to do that, and you can probably ask people around me who have worked closely with me, that at some point or another that I do have a tendency to be very hard on myself. And what I have found from being like that in my own life, and if you ask those people, that is that not only does it lead to making me miserable, but also as a result of that, I end up making everybody else miserable. And I'm kind of like an asshole to people around me if I let that voice of beating myself up too much get too strong. So it makes me miserable, it makes them miserable, and really I just become a dick to people around me. And I'm sure that some people who have worked with me, closely during those periods where I've been really hard on myself could attest to that. And I'm not happy or proud to say that, but it is something that happens. So it is not a productive approach. It's not helpful to us. It's not helpful to them. And I do think that this approach, when taken to its absolute extreme, I think it can lead to horrendous results and outcomes such as suicide. Because if you are your own enemy every single day, if you are beating yourself up every single day, what is the point of you living with yourself? How could you live with yourself if you are that hard on yourself, if you hate yourself on a daily basis? I think when it's taken to its extreme, it's an absolutely unsustainable, and not only just unsustainable, but actually proactively destructive approach. So there must be a better way. There must be another way. And in this video, I just wanted to share with you an approach that I have found that has helped me. And I wanted to share that as a reminder, like I said in the intro of the video, as a reminder to myself, but also as a tool or maybe just an alternative approach. Because if the other approach leads to those destructive results, there has to be a better way. It's worth considering possible alternative ways to go about it. And that's something that in this part of the video I want to discuss. It's that alternative approach. So here's an alternative approach that I have been practicing, I have been working with, and it has produced good results in my life. It has helped me. And I don't get it perfect all the time. And it's not something because it could, if you're trying to get it perfect, I feel like it could lead to that same destructive approach of being way too hard on yourself. Oh, I'm not getting this perfect, so let me beat myself up so maybe I can get it perfect. If I just am hard on myself enough and beating myself up enough, maybe I'll get it right. So it's not really perfection is not the goal, but this is just more like a perspective or just a way of thought that I think it is helpful to implement in our lives if we struggle with beating ourselves up. And it's something I kind of heard about in an audiobook I was listening to. It's a speech, I think, actually, by Richard Rohr, whom is a minister, who's a pastor, but he is very prolific. I really love listening to his books, and especially his book on the Enneagram, which I love the Enneagram. So he is just a really, really good spiritual teacher, in my personal opinion. And in this book, in this audio program, I think it was called Spirituality for the Two Halves of Life. In some part of it, and this was not even a main point or anything in that, it just really stood out to me personally. And he was talking about how he feels the best upbringing, the best kind of situation when we can have in regards to our father and mother is to have a conservative dad and a liberal mom. And I'll explain kind of what he meant by that. Conservative here, kind of using the term conservative, meaning or used in this sense is when he says conservative dad, is a dad who has, let's say, high standards, who has rules, who has boundaries, who maybe, and this may sound bad, but let's say has conditional love. Let's say, it's there's certain standards, he holds us to a certain standard. And then on the flip side, the liberal mom side, let's say, as used here in this context, it goes to show, or is trying to portray, a mother who is unconditionally loving, who in their eyes, we are completely good as we are. We're completely enough as we are. Just as we are is fine. Just as you are loved. That kind of approach, you can be however you are, and that's fine. You are loved. It doesn't matter if you achieve or if you don't. You're gonna be loved regardless in their eyes. So that is the flip side. That is the liberal mom side. So according to Richard Rohr, or this was mainly just an opinion of his, and basically in his opinion, which I do think there's a lot of validity to what he's saying in that regards, which is why I'm sharing it here. According to him, that was the best upbringing someone could have, to have those two juxtaposition, those two balancing forces, so to speak. Because it's if you have two people, two mom and dad who are both super, let's say more of the conservative approach, as we mentioned earlier, what we meant by that in this context. If you have both that are that are holding you to those standards, it's more the conditional love, or you can improve, you can be better type of mindset, versus two parents that just completely unconditionally love you, and like they didn't necessarily like hold you to like a higher standard, but like just as you are is fine, you know, you're good enough, that all those things, which are great, don't get me wrong, but I feel like it does create like a balancing force when you have those two. And according to him, he was talking about like he feels like that having that balance, it's like the best identity building kind of mix that you can have when you have both of those. Now, in our own lives, we may not have had, you know, the perfect mother or the perfect father or either, or maybe we did have both, right? But I think at some point, whether we had the perfect upbringing, the perfect parents, or we did not, I think at some point it is our job in our own lives to cultivate within ourselves that voice of the internal mother, or let's say the internal perfect mother and the internal perfect father. It's like mothering and fathering ourselves. It's an important part, I believe, of our individuation process of removing ourselves from, let's say, the possible attachments that we may have to our family of origin and individuating from that, but still cultivating within ourselves the voice of the perfect mother and the perfect father. And regardless of whether or not we had that outwardly modeled for us in our lives or we didn't, I think it is still something we can cultivate regardless of whether we saw it actually, you know, in our lives, in our upbringing, or we didn't. We can just create that image, create that ideal within ourselves. So what I mean by that is, it is important to create a voice within ourselves that is the voice of the loving, the unconditionally, let's say, the unconditionally loving mother who says, you are good enough just as you are. You are loved just as you are. You are fine just as you are. You know, you can absolutely do anything that you want. You know, anything you set your mind to, you are capable of everything. You know, you're good just as you are. You're good enough just as you are. So it's important to cultivate that voice. Then on the flip side of that, it is important to also cultivate the voice of the dad who holds you to a higher standard. Like, yes, you are good enough, but you can be better. You could strive to be more. You could accomplish goals. You can set your mind to certain objectives and go after them and accomplish them. You can be better. You can improve. You can hold yourself to higher standards in life and accomplish those standards and accomplish those goals. So like, yes, you are good, you know, you are good, but you could be better. That's kind of like the voice of the internal dad that we can cultivate within ourselves. And I think depending on what season of life you may be in, or which one of those sides may be imbalanced in you, I think one of those sides, one of those voices may be louder. But I do think that ultimately and ideally, it is important to create a sense of balance between those two within our lives. I think that it is important to have the bedrock of our lives and really not just our lives, but within our mind, within ourselves, the bedrock to be the mother who unconditionally loves you. So that is the foundation. It is that unconditional love that you are just good just as you are. You don't need to change anything. You know, I feel like it's like that Selena Gomez song. It's like, you know, who says you're not perfect? You know, however that song goes, but like, you know, you are just good just as you are. You're perfect just as you are. You are loved just as you are. So that is the foundation. I think it's important to have that as the foundation. That's like the net, the safety net that you rest in. That is the bedrock. And then with that, mixed with that, is the voice of the Father who calls you to a higher version of yourself, a higher standard, a higher, like, yes, you are loved and good just as you are, but you could be better. So like those voices combined together, you know, you are loved while like accepting where you are and as you are, while simultaneously having an upward orientation in life and striving for that. That combo is absolutely, I think, life-changing and powerful if one can cultivate that balance within oneself. But if you are the type of person who beats themselves up a lot, you know, is too self-critical, internally they're just like very hard on themselves, beating themselves up and like mean to themselves really, like, you know, and it's just like very tough on themselves, it is quite possible that in this context that we're working with, within this framework, that you have a louder inner voice of the father, of the dad, of that like you could be better type of voice that's calling you to like no, you're not like good enough as you are, like you could be better type of like mindset. It is quite possible that if you are that type of person who beats themselves up too much, who is too hard on themselves and is that self-critical, it is quite possible that you have a stronger or a louder dad voice, let's say, within you than the inner mom voice. And so the necessary thing that needs to be balanced here, the juxtaposition to that, is that you need to cultivate the inner mom, and also maybe just completely mute the voice of the dad for a while. If it is getting to a point, which I know it did for me, like last year, I would say was a year, which I'll talk about that a little bit more maybe towards the end of the video, of my own kind of personal journey. But just briefly, I would just say here that last year was a year where I let the voice of the father almost become the only voice in my mind. And the imbalance of that really created a lot of hardships for me personally and individually, and definitely for those around me, close to me as well. So I saw firsthand that not having a stronger voice of the inner mom, of that unconditional love, how burning it could be to not have that. So the remedy, if you are someone who is beating themselves up too much, the remedy to that, I believe, is to cultivate the voice of that inner mom who does love you unconditionally, who sees you just as you are, good just as you are, perfect just as you are, loved just as you are. So how do you practically do that? That is something that I have found a way to do that works for me, that I practice every day now, and it may also serve you. So the method I've been using, the way I've been going about cultivating that voice of the inner mom, that voice that tells me I am loved unconditionally, that I am good just as you are, just as I am is fine. I can just be just however I am, and that's fine. I'm good just as I am. I'm good enough just as I am. The way I've gone about cultivating that voice in my life personally in these past, however many months that I've been practicing this, is through certain meditations that I do. So in these meditations, I would just let myself be and absolutely do nothing. So you could call it like a do nothing meditation. In A Course in Miracles, there's a line that says, I need do nothing, and it's talking about kind of like a certain form of meditation that this is somewhat inspired by what I'm talking about here, which is basically I just let myself be and do nothing. I close my eyes and I allow myself to just do nothing. And I accept myself in that state completely just as I am. It's fine. So I'm just being, I'm not doing anything, and I'm just accepting myself. I am allowing myself to feel and accept the acceptance that on a deepest sense God has for me. I'm just being, not doing anything, and I'm allowing myself to feel acceptance, feel that even though I'm just sitting here and not doing anything, I'm just being, just me being is good enough. Like I am good enough. I allow myself to deeply feel that. So I basically just sit there and I'm just being, and just as I am is fine. I'm just accepting that just as I am is fine. Like I'm literally, there's no closer way I can get to me just being just as I am, right? Like I'm literally not trying to do anything. I'm not trying to be any certain way. Completely, in a sense, like no mask, like completely my deepest essence, like my naked self, let's say. I'm just sitting there and completely, accepting myself just as I am. So this meditation may seem very simple, and it is simple in practice, but to do consistently and continuously, which is I think the important part. You can just do this stuff once and then kind of, expect to have everything be different. But as you do it consistently, this practice has been very, very healing for me, because in a sense, what I'm doing in that mode is like I am cultivating that sense of the internal mother who loves me unconditionally. I am being that for myself. I am allowing myself to just be, close my eyes, just be, and just as I am, not even doing anything, just doing nothing, just as I am, completely just as I am is fine. Like this is fine. how I am is fine. Who I am is fine. And I allow myself to feel that full acceptance. And as I do that consistently, the voice of the mother in a very real and practical sense gets cultivated and louder within myself, because I'm creating that voice within myself and I am watering that voice, and it's like a seed that's been planted and it's sprouting. It's getting louder and louder and louder. And like I said, this practice has been very healing and has been an antidote to that overly yang or yang kind of father, let's say conditional love, higher standard, being hard on myself type of voice that I had made be too strong in my life in the last year. So like I said earlier, and I was talking about last year in 2022, which was a very difficult year for me, I think what happened for me, and this is kind of like how personally I came around to even wanting to make this video, to kind of practice these things. What kind of happened for me, and this is my personal experience, which really was like the genesis. I kind of said that, but like I just wanted to also share my personal experience so that you can see that like, you're not alone in this. I am going through this and have gone through this. And the personal experience for me that kind of led to all this, or thinking along these terms, trying to learn these things, was that in 22, especially at the beginning of the year, or like right before the beginning of the year, I experienced some hardships, and in order to get through that season, through those hardships, I overly cultivated the voice of the internal dad. Like, I need to be better. I need to be harder on myself. I need to like control my mind, control myself to like such a high degree, hold myself to such a high standard, almost to like a ridiculous degree, in order to kind of break through that season of hardship. And maybe it was necessary for that time. It's like if you're in war, right? Like there are different standards, different way of being and thinking that may be required in that season. But during peacetime, you need a different mindset. That's why like sometimes they say like the wartime commander is not necessarily the best peacetime general, or like the person who was president, let's say during wartime, may not be the best president for a peacetime, because like their mind may be too stuck in that mode of being, which is why I think like in England, now I'm not too familiar with the history, but I'm just going to use it archetypically here. Winston Churchill was a man who really was good during wartime. And then the moment that the war ended, like he helped England so much during war, but like the moment that was ended, it's like, I think they got rid of him. Like he wasn't needed anymore. Like his mindset may have been too stuck in wartime thinking that he couldn't adjust to peacetime thinking. But I kind of went through a season that was like wartime, and to get through that season, I cultivated that internal, overly yang, kind of like yang. I'm talking about the yin yang in like, let's say Chinese medicine, of the yin being the more, in our example, like the more mother side, and the yang being the more father side. I cultivated too much of that internal father voice. And I made that super loud. And I made it so loud that almost like the voice of the mother was completely non-existent. And then when that season ended, when those hardships were actually over and I was out of that, I didn't realize how stuck I have become in that mode of being, of the internal father being super loud. That's that way of being super hard on myself, very challenging with myself. That had become like a mode of being for so long that I didn't even realize like how stuck in that mode I was. So even when the circumstances had changed, I, in a sense, was still stuck. It was like that mode of being had become a habit for me. And a really, 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 really good book on this idea of a certain mode of being becoming a habit for us is called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. And this book has tremendously helped me. I'm reading it again right now. It's like I've always read like a chapter here, a chapter there, but I'm really just going through it now. And it has been so life-giving for me, and it's so impactful and profound, this book. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. But nonetheless, it was like, I didn't know. So even when that season of hardship was over, I didn't know, I didn't even realize how like stuck I've become, how much of a habit has formed around that way of being for me. And besides that, rather than that, I didn't even know how to snap myself out of it anymore. Like, I didn't know how to not be that way. And by being that way so much, especially over like a course of a year, it was really like at the beginning of the year that like I reached a point, and there's been times in my life where I reached this point that's like, I just cannot live this way anymore. Like, I've reached that point in different areas of my life, at different phases and different chapters of my life, of like hitting this point where you're like just tired of being a certain way, and you're just like, I just can't be like this anymore. You hit that point, and then that's a point of massive trajectory shift in your life. Massive change could come as a result of that, of hitting that point, of that threshold. And I did hit that, at the end of 2022. I was like, I don't want another year of this. I can't live like this anymore. And that's when I decided to really change my approach to a strong degree. But even like prior to that, I was starting to really hit that threshold. And that way of being was really in 2022 was like taking me to some dark places. And I just didn't want to live like that anymore. So that's why I went through all this. All of the things I shared in this video are as a result of going through that personal experience. And by no means do I have this all figured out right now. And I know that's kind of like cheesy to say, but like really, truly, this is a work in progress, for me. And sometimes I like to make these videos that are not like, oh, like I have fully learned this thing, let me share it with you because I have mastered it, now I'm going to share it with you. I like to make videos like this sometimes where it's like I'm in the midst of learning something, I'm in the midst of going through something. Let me nonetheless, even though I don't feel like I fully have it figured out and completely like mastered, I'm still gonna show up and share this because maybe it actually will be more impactful to be honestly like in the experience, share my experience with you and certain things that may have helped me go through that experience and things that I have learned along my journey, because maybe that actually would be more helpful versus like completely being out of it and then looking back and saying like, oh, like, that's how, I accomplished success. I think sometimes like sharing the journey may be more impactful, and that's why I wanted to show up here and share this video, even though I don't fully have this topic figured out. It is something that I still felt strongly I need to share about, because I'm sure a lot of people struggle with this. A lot of people are too hard on themselves, beating themselves up to a point that is not constructive whatsoever, and it may be causing a lot of damaging side effects in their own life and in the lives of everybody around them. So that's why, even though I don't have it fully figured out, I still wanted to show up and make this video and share my experience, because this whole practice of the meditation I shared, the cultivating the voice of the inner mom and the inner dad, but making the voice of the mother louder in yourself if you are the type of person who may be beating themselves up too much. And that meditation of like feeling that, just being, not doing anything, like that doing nothing meditation that I talked about, of like just being, just, feeling just as I am is fine, just as I'm being is fine. Like I don't need to do anything to be fine. I am fine just as I am. That practice and cultivating the voice of the inner mom and making that voice be louder has been so healing for me and transformative for me. And that's why I wanted to share that with you in the hopes that it helps you. And I truly, genuinely hope that it does help you and serves you. And if there are things that you have learned that have helped you in this regard, in this context, please feel free to share those with me. You can comment down below, and my email is on my channel's About Us section, so you can also reach me there. So that is it for this video. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for being on my channel. I hope that it helped you. I hope that it serves you. And if it did, please let me know by giving the video a thumbs up. And also, if you want to see more videos from me just like this one, please feel free to subscribe if you feel inclined to. And again, my name is PJ. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you in my next video. Until then, take care. Bye.